The ancient arena of Nexus Prime loomed against the purple sky, its crystalline spires reflecting the light of 3 setting suns. Kira Harrison stood at the base of the structure, her dark skin glistening with sweat despite the environmental suit's best efforts to regulate her temperature. The registration hall buzzed with activity as representatives from 100 worlds gathered for the Stellar Crucible, the galaxy's most prestigious and lethal competition. At 32, Kira was neither the youngest nor the strongest competitor, but 15 years of Special Forces experience had taught her that survival rarely depended on brute force alone. She approached the registration terminal, conscious of the looks she received from the other competitors. Some were curious, others dismissive, but most were predatory. Species designation, the holographic interface chirped. Human, Kira responded, her voice steady despite the weight of the moment. The terminal paused longer than usual, as if processing an unexpected input. Warning: environmental conditions on Nexus Prime exceed human biological tolerance by 247%. Confirm registration. Confirmed. Kira pressed her palm against the scanner, trying to ignore the deep, rumbling laughter behind her. The soft skin wishes to die with the legends, a voice like grinding stones spoke in accented galactic standard. Kira turned to face a Drachnid warrior, its scaled body easily 3 meters tall, armor plates shifting with each breath. The creature's name was Vexthor, champion of the last 3 crucibles. I wish to compete, Kira replied simply, meeting all 4 of the warrior's eyes without flinching. Compete? Vexthor's facial scales rippled in amusement. Human, this is not one of your sporting events. The crucible breaks species far more resilient than yours. Your bones will join the millions that litter the proving grounds. Kira had heard variations of this speech since the moment Earth announced its first entry into the crucible. The betting odds against her survival, let alone victory, were astronomical. Yet she remembered the words of her mentor, Admiral Chen, before she left Earth: they expect us to fail because they don't understand what humanity truly is. Show them. The next 12 hours were a blur of medical examinations, equipment checks, and briefings. The competition would take place across 5 regions of Nexus Prime, each designed to test different aspects of survival and combat prowess. Competitors could bring their own equipment, but nothing that could provide unfair advantages, a rule that had sparked centuries of debates about what constituted natural abilities for various species. In her assigned preparation chamber, Kira methodically checked her gear. The environmental suit was a marvel of human engineering, developed specifically for the Crucible by a team of Earth's finest minds. It looked deceptively simple compared to the Baroque armor of the Drachnids or the bioengineered shells of the Meridians, but its strength lay in its adaptability. Competitor Harrison. A soft voice interrupted her preparations. A Listini observer stood at her door, its translucent body pulsing with gentle lights. The pre-competition scan detected an anomaly in your genetic profile. Are you enhanced? Kira smiled slightly. No enhancements. Just regular human DNA with a few natural mutations. She didn't mention that those mutations had been specifically selected for through a carefully planned breeding program spanning 3 generations of her family. Earth had been preparing for this moment for longer than anyone suspected. The evening before the competition, Kira sat in the observation dome, studying the terrain she would face tomorrow. The first challenge would take them through the crystal forests, where the local flora could shred battle armor like paper. Most competitors were resting, conserving energy for the trials ahead, but Kira knew sleep would elude her. You're doing it wrong, a melodic voice said. A meridian floated nearby, its shell shimmering with iridescent patterns. Studying the terrain is pointless. It changes every competition. I'm not studying the terrain, Kira replied, her eyes never leaving the landscape below. I'm studying the patterns. The way the wind moves. How the crystals grow. Nature always follows patterns, even here. The Meridian's shell pulsed with what might have been surprise. You speak like one who has fought against nature before. On Earth, we've been fighting nature since we first walked upright, Kira said. Every environment, every climate, every challenge, we adapted. Not through evolution or engineering, but through understanding and persistence. As the final sun set, casting the world in darkness broken only by the bioluminescent flora, Kira returned to her chamber. She activated her suit's neural interface, feeling the familiar tingle as it synchronized with her nervous system. Tomorrow would begin the greatest test of her life, but more importantly, it would be humanity's chance to prove itself among the stars. The morning came with the screech of alien horns and the rumble of atmospheric processors preparing the arena. Kira stood at her designated starting position, surrounded by beings that evolution had crafted into living weapons. Yet as she watched them flex their armored limbs and bear their various forms of natural weaponry, she felt no fear, only a deep, quiet certainty. A Drachnid official approached each competitor, performing final equipment checks. When it reached Kira, it spent extra time examining her suit, clearly expecting to find hidden advantages. Finding none, it moved on with a grunt of either approval or disappointment. It was hard to tell with Drachnids. Competitors, the announcement boomed in multiple languages, prepare for initialization sequence. May the worthy survive and the strong prevail. Kira took a deep breath, feeling the suit adjust to her changing vital signs. Around her, the other competitors took their stance, each according to their species' customs. Vexthor stood directly ahead, its armor gleaming in the morning light. Begin in 10. The countdown started. Kira thought of Earth, of the billions watching this moment. Of humanity's long journey from caves to stars, always adapting, always surviving. 5. She adjusted her stance slightly, positioning herself for maximum efficiency. 3. The suit systems hummed to full power. 2. A final deep breath. 1. The signal flared across the purple sky, and the stellar crucible began. The crystal forest erupted in chaos as 63 competitors surged forward. The morning light fractured through the crystalline trees, creating a maze of shadows and deadly reflections. Kira immediately broke from the pack, veering left while most competitors charged straight ahead. Tactical error, human. Vexthor's booming voice carried across the battlefield. The Drachnid champion led the main group, his massive form smashing through smaller crystal formations. Behind him, 2 Meridians glided effortlessly over the jagged terrain, their shells refracting light in hypnotic patterns. But Kira had seen what they hadn't. The crystal trees weren't random growths, they followed underground mineral veins. Moving parallel to these veins meant smoother terrain and fewer deadly shards. While others fought against the environment, she worked with it. The first casualties came within minutes. A piercing shriek echoed through the forest as a Xerxian warrior discovered too late that the crystals weren't just sharp, they were alive. The formations responded to vibration, growing and splintering in seconds. 3 more competitors fell to similar fates, their bodies encased in crystalline tombs. Kira maintained her pace, her suit's sensors mapping safe paths through the terrain. The specially designed soles of her boots dispersed her weight, minimizing vibrations. Each step was calculated, each movement precise. She wasn't the fastest, but she was the most efficient. Remarkable adaptation, a voice whispered from above. One of the Meridians had noticed her strategy and dropped back from the main group. Its shell pulsed with analytical patterns. You understand the forest's nature. Everything has a pattern, Kira replied, not breaking her stride. Even chaos. The Meridian, who introduced itself as 9, kept pace with her. Its presence drew curious looks from other competitors, many of whom had never seen a Meridian choose to accompany a lesser species. But Kira welcomed the company. Meridians were known for their tactical intelligence, and alliances, while rare in the Crucible, weren't forbidden. The first major obstacle appeared 2 hours into the race, the acid lakes. Vast pools of corrosive liquid stretched across the landscape, their surface deceivingly peaceful. The main group had reached it first, and their attempts to cross were proving costly. Even Vexthor's legendary armor showed signs of corrosion. "They're approaching it wrong," Kira muttered, studying the scene from the cover of the crystal trees. "The acid isn't the real challenge." Nina's shell flickered with interest. "Explain." "Watch the surface tension. The acid's reacting to something in the air. The real path." Kira picked up a crystal shard and tossed it across the lake. It skipped 3 times before dissolving, but before it did, the acid surface momentarily solidified. "Crystallization through impact," Nine observed. "The acid forms temporary bridges." Kira smiled. "Exactly. But timing is everything." She backed up several paces, then sprinted forward. Her suit's systems calculated trajectory and timing, syncing with her natural rhythm. As she reached the lake's edge, she leaped. The impact of her landing caused the acid to crystallize in a small radius. Before it could dissolve, she was moving again, each step creating a new temporary platform. Behind her, Nine followed, its levitating form barely touching the crystallized surfaces. Others noticed their success and tried to imitate the technique, but few had the precise timing required. The acid claimed 5 more competitors before the lake crossing was done. The day wore on, and the challenges intensified. The crystal forest gave way to fields of magnetic ore that played havoc with electronic systems. Many competitors' advanced gear failed, leaving them vulnerable to the environment. Kira's suit, however, used old-school backup systems, analog solutions to digital problems. "Your technology is primitive," a struggling Drachnid warrior observed as Kira passed him, his own sophisticated armor locked in place by the magnetic fields. "Sometimes primitive is better," she replied, continuing forward. By nightfall, the field had been reduced by half. The survivors gathered at designated safe zones, required rest periods enforced by the Crucible's ancient rules. Kira found a defensible position and began maintaining her suit, aware of the eyes watching her. Vexthor approached her rest area, his massive form casting long shadows in the bioluminescent light. "You survived," he stated, a mix of surprise and grudging respect in his voice. "Disappointed?" Kira asked, not looking up from her work. "Curious," the champion replied. "You move differently than the others. You see things they miss. Humans had to learn to see what others miss. It's how we survived before we had all this." She gestured to the advanced technology surrounding them. The Drachnid was quiet for a moment. "Tomorrow we enter the storm's heart. Many think it impossible for your kind to survive its energies." "Many thought it was impossible for us to reach the stars," Kira countered. "We did it anyway." As the competitors settled in for their rest period, Kira reviewed the data her suit had collected. The crystal forest had been brutal, but it was just the beginning. The storm's heart would test them in ways that went beyond physical endurance. Most importantly, it would test their ability to adapt. Nine drifted near her position. "Your species intrigues me," the Meridian said. "You lack natural advantages, yet you create opportunities where others see only obstacles. That's humanity's real strength," Kira replied, watching the strange auroras dance across the alien sky. "We don't just survive, we learn. Every failure, every success, every challenge becomes part of who we are." As the second sun set and the third began to rise, Kira allowed herself a few hours of rest. Tomorrow would bring new challenges, and she needed to be ready. The storm's heart awaited, and with it, the true test of humanity's place among the stars would begin. The night was filled with the sounds of the crystal forest, the singing of wind through the formations, the distant crashes of unstable growths collapsing, and the quiet hum of energy fields protecting the rest zones. But beneath it all was a deeper sound, the rumble of the approaching storm that would either break them or prove them worthy of the Crucible's legacy. Dawn never truly came in the storm's heart. Instead, the darkness was broken by continuous flashes of purple-white lightning that turned the landscape into a strobe-lit nightmare. Kira stood at the edge of the safe zone, watching the electromagnetic maelstrom that had already claimed 3 competitors who'd ventured out too eagerly. The storm strips away pretense, 9 observed, hovering nearby. In its heart, we are all equally vulnerable. The Meridian's words proved prophetic. As the remaining competitors entered the storm, their technological advantages began to fail. The Drachnid's powered armor stuttered and locked. The Xerxian's energy shields flickered and died. Even the Meridian's sophisticated shells struggled to maintain their protective fields. Kira's suit, however, continued functioning. Its simple, redundant systems might not have been as powerful as the others, but they were far more resilient. She moved through the storm like a diver through rough waters, reading its currents and flows. Impossible. The cry came from somewhere behind her. The human systems should have failed. You rely too much on power, Kira muttered to herself, remembering her training. Sometimes less is more. The storm intensified as they pushed deeper into its heart. Lightning no longer just flashed across the sky, it crawled along the ground in serpentine patterns, seeking conductive materials. The air itself became charged, making every breath feel like inhaling static electricity. Vex Thor, the mighty champion, struggled nearby. His armor, normally a testament to Drachnid engineering, had become a liability. Each lightning strike sent cascading failures through its systems. Yet he pressed on, his species' legendary determination driving him forward. Your kind's persistence is admirable, Kira said as she passed him, but sometimes adaptation beats raw strength. The Drachnid's response was lost in a thunderclap, but his expression showed a growing understanding. The galaxy's dominant species were learning a harsh lesson about the difference between power and survival. Halfway through the storm zone, the true challenge revealed itself. The lightning wasn't random, it was intelligent. The storm was alive, a vast electromagnetic consciousness that had evolved in this hostile environment. It tested each competitor, probing for weaknesses, learning from each interaction. Kira felt it touch her mind through her suit's neural interface. Images flashed through her consciousness, earth storms, hurricanes, tornadoes. The entity was curious about her world, about how humans had learned to survive their own atmospheric fury. We respect the storm, Kira whispered, knowing the entity could understand. We don't try to dominate it. We learn from it. The storm's response was subtle, a slight decrease in the intensity of nearby strikes, a clearer path forward. It recognized in humans a kindred spirit of adaptation and survival. Not everyone received such consideration. 2 more competitors fell, their bodies overloaded by the storm's probing. Others turned back, unable to cope with both the physical and psychological strain. The storm didn't just challenge their bodies, it forced them to confront their own limitations. 9 remained close to Kira, its shell now operating on minimal power. Your species understands something that many of ours have forgotten, the Meridian said. True strength lies not in resisting change, but in embracing it. The final stretch of the storm zone brought the greatest challenge yet. A wall of pure energy, crackling with possibilities, blocked the path. Most competitors gathered at its base, their remaining technology useless against its power. Kira studied the barrier, noting how it pulsed and shifted. It's not meant to be broken through, she realized. It's meant to be understood. She began to move in sync with the energy's rhythm, her suit adapting its frequencies to match the storm's natural resonance. Step by step, she walked through the barrier as if it wasn't there. The storm recognized a being that sought harmony rather than dominance. Behind her, IX followed her example, its shell synchronizing with the same frequencies. A few others caught on, but many remained trapped, their powerful technology rendered meaningless by the storm's simple truth. As they emerged from the storm's heart, only 20 competitors remained. The next phase would take them into the burning wastes, where raw heat and radiation would test their endurance. But they had learned a crucial lesson: in the crucible, as in nature itself, survival wasn't about being the strongest or most advanced. It was about understanding, adapting, and finding harmony with forces greater than oneself. Kira took a moment to maintain her suit, its systems strained but intact. She could feel the watching eyes of the alien spectators, their perception of humanity shifting. They had expected the human to fail in the storm. Instead, she had shown them a different way to face its challenges. The burning wastes will not be so accommodating, Vexthor warned as he finally emerged from the storm, his armor scarred but functional. There is no reasoning with heat and radiation. Kira smiled. There's always a way forward, she replied. We just have to be willing to find it. The third phase of the crucible loomed before them, its heat-distorted atmosphere promising new trials. But as Kira prepared to face it, she knew that humanity's greatest strength wasn't in its technology or physical capabilities. It was in its endless capacity to learn, adapt, and grow stronger from every challenge. The storm had tested them, changed them, and taught them. Now it was time to see who would take those lessons into the burning heart of Nexus Prime. The burning wastes lived up to their name. 3 suns beat down on an endless expanse of obsidian sand, creating heat mirages that danced like mocking spirits. Kira's suit readings showed external temperatures approaching 500 degrees Celsius, hot enough to melt lead. Of the 20 competitors who had survived the storm's heart, 3 fell within the first hour of entering the wastes. Their cooling systems, already strained from previous challenges, simply couldn't cope with the extreme heat. Even Nina's crystalline shell showed signs of stress, its usually smooth surface developing tiny fractures. This is where determination means nothing, a Xerxian warrior gasped before collapsing. Only technological superiority can, his words cut off as his protection failed, his body crystallizing in the intense heat. But Kira had learned something from her years of studying Earth's extremophiles, life that thrived in the most hostile environments. Her suit wasn't fighting the heat, it was working with it. The outer layer absorbed and redirected thermal energy, creating a convection current that actually helped power her systems. Your suit, Vexthor observed as they crossed a particularly treacherous stretch of ground. It's not just protecting you. It's changing. Kira nodded. Adaptation isn't just about resistance. Sometimes it's about transformation. The Drachnid champion fell silent, contemplating this. His own armor, though incredibly advanced, was showing signs of material fatigue. The burning wastes weren't just testing their ability to endure heat, they were testing their fundamental approach to survival. Halfway across the wastes, they encountered the shimmer fields, areas where the intense heat created quantum fluctuations in reality itself. Space bent and twisted, making distance and direction meaningless. Several competitors wandered in circles, their navigation systems confused by the distortions. The path is an illusion, 9 noted, its shell pulsing with concern. Traditional navigation is useless here. Kira remembered her desert survival training. When you can't trust your eyes, you trust the constants. She began tracking the minimal temperature variations, using them like a compass. The heat wasn't uniform, it flowed in patterns, just like everything else in nature. As they progressed, the physical challenges were compounded by psychological warfare. The heat began to affect their minds, creating hallucinations and bringing buried fears to the surface. Competitors started seeing mirages of their homeworlds, loved ones, or worst nightmares. What do you see, human? Vexthor asked, his voice strained. What visions torment you? Kira saw Earth, but not as it was, she saw it as it could be, a world united by the challenge of reaching the stars. I see possibility, she answered. The future we're fighting for. The remaining competitors were spread out now, each fighting their own battles against the environment and their minds. 9 stayed close to Kira, its analytical nature helping both of them distinguish reality from illusion. But even the Meridian's legendary composure was being tested. Then came the burning wind, a phenomenon unique to this region of Nexus Prime. Superheated plasma rolled across the landscape like a tsunami of fire. Most competitors scrambled for what little cover the terrain offered, but Kira saw an opportunity. The wind isn't just destruction, she called out to those nearby. It's energy. We can use it. She adjusted her suit's thermal collectors, letting the plasma wind flow around her. The energy it provided gave her systems a boost, allowing her to move faster and more efficiently. A few others, including IX and Vexthor, followed her example, adapting their protective systems to work with the wind rather than against it. But the burning wastes had one final challenge. As they approached the exit zone, the ground began to liquefy, turning to molten glass. The heat had finally overcome the landscape itself. Competitors who had survived everything else now faced an impossible choice: retreat or risk crossing an ocean of liquid fire. "This is madness," one of the surviving drachnids growled. "No technology can withstand direct contact with molten stone." "Then we don't make contact," Kira said, studying the flow patterns in the molten surface. "We ride the convection currents." Using her suit's enhanced sensors, she mapped the areas where cooling created temporary islands of stability. By timing her movements perfectly, she could cross the molten field by jumping from one cooling spot to another. It required perfect timing and absolute trust in her calculations. "You'll die," Vexthor warned. "Maybe," Kira agreed. "But that's how humans advance, by doing what everyone else thinks is impossible." She began her crossing, each jump a dance with death. The heat was overwhelming, but her suit's systems held, redirecting enough energy to keep her alive. Behind her, 9 followed, using its levitation abilities in new ways to surf the thermal currents. Even Vexthor, after seeing it was possible, found his own way across, his massive form leaving cooling spots that others could use. As the last survivors emerged from the burning wastes, they were changed. The heat had burned away pretense and prejudice, leaving only respect for those who had endured. Of the 20 who had entered, only 12 remained to face the final challenge. Kira stood at the edge of the wasteland, looking toward their final destination, the Mountain of Gods. Her suit was scarred but functional, transformed by the challenges it had faced. Like humanity itself, it had grown stronger through adversity. "You've shown us something remarkable," 9 said, its shell now bearing proud battle scars. "Your species doesn't just survive, you transform survival itself into an art." The Mountain of Gods loomed ahead, its peak lost in clouds of unknown composition. The final test awaited, but they had all learned something vital in the burning wastes. True strength isn't about being impervious to change, it's about having the wisdom to change when necessary. The Mountain of Gods pierced the purple sky of Nexus Prime like an obsidian spear. Ancient legends claimed it was no natural formation, but rather a test created by a long-vanished civilization. Looking up at its impossible geometry, Kira could believe those legends. Only 12 competitors remained: Kira, 9, Vexthor, 3 other drachnids, 2 meridians, and 4 representatives of various species. They gathered at the mountain's base, where the Crucible's final revelation awaited them. "Survivors," the announcement echoed in their minds, transmitted directly by the mountain itself. "You have proven your physical worth. Now face the true test." The mountain's surface rippled like liquid metal, and a gateway appeared. Through it, they could see not a physical path, but a swirling vortex of pure possibility. The mountain wasn't just a mountain, it was a gateway to something beyond normal space and time. "The final challenge is choice," the mountain's consciousness continued. "Each of you may claim victory, or all may transcend it. Choose wisely." Understanding dawned on Kira's face. "It's not about winning," she said softly. "It never was." Vexthor turned all 4 eyes toward her. "Explain, human." "Look at our journey," Kira gestured to their scarred and transformed bodies and equipment. "The crystal forest taught us to work with our environment. The storm's heart showed us the power of adaptation. The burning wastes proved that transformation is stronger than resistance. Every challenge was leading us to this moment. Nina's shell pulsed with revelation. The crucible isn't a competition. It's an evolution test, Kira finished. The remaining competitors looked at each other, centuries of rivalry and species prejudice warring with their shared experiences. They had survived together, learned from each other, grown beyond their original limitations. If we choose individual victory, Kira continued, we prove we've learned nothing. But if we choose to transcend together, we become something more, Vexthor rumbled, surprising everyone. The champion who had won 3 previous crucibles through dominance now understood its true purpose. One by one, the competitors joined hands, tentacles, or energy fields. Species that had been enemies for millennia stood together before the gateway. The mountain's consciousness touched their minds again, this time with approval. You understand, it said. The greatest challenges cannot be overcome alone. The universe does not reward the strongest individual, but the strongest bonds. As they stepped through the gateway together, reality shifted. Their consciousness expanded, allowing them to see the universe as the ancient builders had seen it. Countless civilizations rising and falling, all facing the same choice between competition and cooperation, between isolation and unity. The gateway's energy surrounded them, beginning a transformation that would rewrite not just their bodies but their understanding of existence itself. Kira felt her consciousness merge with the others, not losing her identity but expanding it. Human ingenuity combined with drachnid strength, meridian wisdom, and the unique perspectives of all species present. They emerged changed. Not as winners and losers, but as pioneers of a new form of existence. Their bodies retained their original forms but were now suffused with the mountain's energy, marking them as those who had chosen wisdom over victory. The crowds watching through the Crucible's broadcast networks fell silent, witnessing something unprecedented in the competition's history. Then, gradually, understanding spread through the galaxy. The stellar crucible had never been about proving superiority, it had been waiting for competitors who would choose to transcend their differences. Kira stood with her fellow ascended beings, looking out over Nexus Prime. What now? She asked, though the question was both spoken and thought. Now, Nine responded, its shell now permanently transformed into a living crystal, we show others the way. Your species, Vexthor said to Kira, his form now radiating an inner light, helped us all see what should have been obvious. Humanity's greatest strength was never your adaptability or ingenuity alone, it was your ability to inspire others to grow beyond their limitations. The mountain of gods began to sink back into Nexus Prime, its purpose finally fulfilled after eons of waiting. But its consciousness remained connected to those who had chosen transcendence, a reminder that the greatest victories are those that lift all. As news of what had happened spread through the galaxy, old rivalries began to fade. Species that had viewed each other with suspicion for millennia now saw the possibility of something greater. The transformed competitors became living proof that evolution didn't have to mean competition, it could mean cooperation, growth, and shared transcendence. Kira's last thought as purely human was a message to Earth: we didn't just prove humanity's worth to the galaxy. We helped the galaxy prove its worth to itself. The stellar crucible was never held again, it didn't need to be. Instead, the Mountain of Gods became a pilgrimage site for those seeking to follow the path of transcendence, guided by those who had first chosen to put aside victory in favor of something greater, the triumph of unity over division, of wisdom over power, of will over limitation. And somewhere in the vast cosmos, 12 beings who had once been separate species watched as the seeds of their choice grew into a new age of galactic cooperation, proving that the greatest challenges in the universe could only be overcome together.